U.S. warned all day of a full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, that it was imminent, Vladimir Putin has just addressed the Russian people moments ago, announcing what Putin called the start of a military special operation, in his words, to demilitarize Ukraine. That Russia would bring in troops, he told Ukrainian troops, to lay down arms and go home. Putin warned outside countries not to interfere. A Russian military operation, it would appear, is now underway. More than 150,000 Russian troops had been surrounding Ukraine for days now, surrounding the borders in the north, the east, and the south. The senior U.S. defense official had already reported the troops were uncoiled, they were ready all day. There were several ominous developments leading up to this tonight from Vladimir Putin himself. Russian state media now reporting that those two separatist regions inside Ukraine that Vladimir Putin declared as independent, that they were now requesting military help from Vladimir Putin and the Russian military in taking on Ukrainian forces. Of course, this was exactly what the U.S. and the West believed Putin would do, that Putin would use a request for help like this, one as a pretext or reason for moving in to explain any large-scale invasion.
Bond and Jennifer, we're hearing spiraling out of control, which is obviously extremely disturbing out of the UN. What can you tell us?
Well, Laura, what I can tell you is that I'm watching images in downtown Kyiv where where reporters are showing what appear to be they say they're hearing explosions in the capital of Kyiv. This is what we have been expecting. We have been told that once the airstrikes and missile strikes begin, that all of Ukraine is in Vladimir Putin's sights. I want to read to you what Putin said in his speech at 6 a.m. this morning when he announced this military action inside Ukraine. Here's what he said, and it's very ominous. In an apparent warning to the United States and NATO, he said in his address, a couple of words for those who would be tempted to intervene. Russia will respond immediately, and you will have consequences that you never have had before in your history. I want to pick up on something that Lucas was talking about earlier as to why it is that the U.S. has not put troops on the ground or flying in the airspace above Ukraine. It is a very different situation we find ourselves in tonight, because these are two nuclear powers. The U.S. and NATO know that when you are talking about Russia and Russia going into a sovereign country like the Ukraine, it's not something where you can put your military there on the ground and risk it escalating into a nuclear war.
Special report. I'm Nora O'Donnell in Washington, and we are coming on the air because the war in Ukraine has begun. Just minutes after Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a special military operation in eastern Ukraine, explosions were heard in Kyiv, and that is where Charlie D'Agata is tonight. And Charlie, tell us what you're hearing and seeing.
Well, it's just a few moments ago we heard 5 loud explosions. 3 to begin with. That sounded like a fighter jet overhead. So 3 to begin with, followed by 2 more. It's just after 5:15 in the morning here in Kyiv. There were reports of explosions earlier tonight or earlier this morning here, and then what was very clear, distinctive explosions, 5 in a row, 3 followed by 2 more after that, and then whatever that was, which sounded like a fighter jet coming in.
And, of course, the airspace has been closed there. Charlie, describe the situation. We did hear from the president of Ukraine earlier tonight. He's there. He has not fled his country.
Yes, well, Nora, we've been following this for so many days and weeks, and the tensions have been building up, and we've all been expecting, something major to happen, an invasion, possibly airstrikes. We thought it might be happening in the east, and we know the fighting has been taking place in the east, but we also know that there are targets, the Russians would consider legitimate targets here in Ukraine itself. And I was going to say last night, not necessarily last night, we went to bed thinking, well, maybe this is the night where a full-scale invasion might take place. An invasion like that would would start with airstrikes, we've been told, and then those explosions earlier, about 10 minutes ago, and then what you just heard.
That's right.
5 explosions that we've heard here in the Capitol, and then whatever that was flying overhead.
Well, distinguished members of the Security Council, Secretary General, Undersecretary, before I try to deliver parts of the statement that I came here with tonight, most of it is already useless since 10 p.m. New York time. I would like to cite Article 4 of the UN Charter, and it says membership in the United Nations is open to all other peace-loving states which accept the obligations contained in the present Charter and in the judgment of the organization are able and willing to carry out these obligations. Russia is not able to carry out any of the obligations. The ambassador of the Russian Federation 3 minutes ago confirmed that his president declared a war on my country.
The Secretary General of the United Nations General Assembly, Antonio Guterres, where he said that at this point of time, the United Nations can only appeal to Russia besides the other financial sanctions that have been imposed by the United States and its allies in the West. He also said that this could, of course, mark the worst crisis since the beginning of the century, the worst war since the beginning of the century, with devastating and tragic consequences to people in Ukraine, to people in Russia, and indeed to wider Europe. Now, this, of course, marks the beginning of what for many, many weeks people had been talking about. This marks the beginning of a Russian military operation.
Now for more is ABC News contributor and retired General Robert Abrams. General Abrams was an advisor to former U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel during the last invasion of Ukraine, and more recently was the head of U.S. forces in Korea. Thank you so much for your time tonight, General. It appears that we are closer than ever before to war in Ukraine, that Russia is. As I just mentioned, you dealt with the last invasion in Ukraine. Is there a key sign that in your mind tells you, okay, they are definitely going in, no turning back at this point?
Lindsay, I think that most telltale sign you heard mentioned earlier by Ian, of course, is the preposition of field hospitals, blood supplies, and as Martha mentioned, they've moved very close to the border. And, not 15 minutes ago, I heard a report that Russia has closed the airspace over eastern Ukraine. That's probably the final warning that a ground invasion of Ukraine by a large Russian force is imminent in the next couple of hours.
Does the Russian military have the capability and manpower to take control of all of Ukraine, or do you think that they have something else in mind?
Well, I think they have something else in mind, something akin to what Martha mentioned, and that's to do this operation in phases or stages. I don't think they'll make an all-out run to try to secure all of Ukraine. They're gonna try to eat this elephant one bite at a time, and we'll most likely see initial phases to take a portion of eastern Ukraine, perhaps to the Dnieper River, but certainly that with fixing attacks or limited objective attacks from other directions to keep those Ukrainian forces in other regions pinned down so that Russia can maintain their numerical superiority at the point where they want to penetrate into Ukraine.
Gangs 2 is there on the ground. Trey, give us an update there as dawn is now upon you.
Guys, we just heard air raid sirens going off. You can hear them right now. Air raid sirens are going off in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev, indicating there are likely some incoming Russian strikes set to take place. This is the first time we have heard these sirens since war erupted between Ukraine and Russia. Earlier in the night, there were at least 36 strikes taking place in different locations around Kiev. According to officials that we've talked to, these strikes were targeting military barracks outside of the city and also other key infrastructure around the Ukrainian capital. It is not just Kiev that is under attack. The second largest city in Ukraine, Kharkiv, cities like Odessa and Mariupol in the south, taking fire from Russian forces. And we also understand that that amphibious assault that my colleague Lucas Tomlinson talked about is underway at this hour. Make no mistake, this is a full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine happening right now, and the air raid sirens going off in the Ukrainian capital as we speak.
All right, we're going to go now to Rick Grinnell, former U.S. ambassador to Germany, former acting DNI. A good person to talk to in a situation like that. Rick is on the phone with us. Rick, just to let you know, Dmytro Kuleba, who is one of Ukraine's, I think their ambassador, but we've heard him speaking all week at the UN. Putin has launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Peaceful Ukrainian cities are under strike. This is a war of aggression. Ukraine will defend itself and will win. The world can and must stop Putin. The time to act is now. Ukraine seems to want to go at this very aggressively.
Look, Rob, first of all, let's just say that we should all be saying a prayer for the people of Ukraine. This is a needless war. It should not be happening. And I blame the Germans for showing how weak they were going to be on the world stage, certainly encouraging NATO members to not help Ukraine, certainly telling the Ukrainian government to take NATO membership off the options list, to give in to the Russians. The weakness that the Germans have created has really caused this rewriting of borders in Europe. I also have to put the diplomatic failure here squarely on the Biden team. This is a diplomatic failure. Very few places will ever hold bureaucrats to account. But the reality is when you look at war, it means that the State Department has failed. And this is what we're looking at. Anthony Blinken has not delivered the tough diplomacy that should have come forward. Joe Biden has not delivered tough diplomacy in the face of Russian aggression. This is a needless war, and let's just remind everybody that the Biden administration and the Senate Democrats took the sanctions off the Russian Nord Stream 2 pipeline at the request of the Germans. Chancellor Merkel is responsible for creating this system here where the Russians had influence in Europe and felt empowered. And we are seeing what all of that is, how all of that is unfolding right before our eyes.
Well, hello. First and foremost, I'm speaking for everyone good in this world. I want to say a few things, and I'm going to try to make it short and sweet. First and foremost, this whole world is led by a group of cowards. Yeah. Every single one of you so-called self-proclaimed leaders are cowards. This includes you too, Vladimir. This includes you. But you're not alone. No siree, Bobby Pin. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the four horsemen of the apocalypse. You've got Joe Biden, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, and the Chinese president, Xi Jinping. That is four. Now, what you do is you start wars, but you do not fight in them. No, you send your people out to die. Put their life on the line for your greed. Because you have no stakes in these wars. You'll lose nothing. But these people, they lose their lives. Even innocent civilians lose their lives. The families of the soldiers, they lose loved ones. While you all just sit back and laugh. Well, you started this war. You did. All of you did. And I'm talking about you self-proclaimed world leaders. But I'm here to tell you, when it is all said and done, you're gonna kneel before the people of this world as you tremble in your penny loafers. So, till then, your fearless leader and king, King X, and I bid you, yo do. You do. Tell him, Ike.
I'll see you soon.